Okay.
Paratraining.
So where there is food flowing, right, within the stomach, the mucosa always lines it, right, just like in the esophagus. But we don't have stratified squamous here. We have simple columnar cells here. Okay, so those are the cells. You scroll up a little bit. Those are the cells right here. Okay. Notice though there are not big waves. That's part of the small intestine. Those are the villi. Okay, so in the stomach, mostly it's churning. You're not really absorbing much at all. Okay, and so there, you only have the villi where you're absorbing a lot of nutrients, like in the small intestine. So simple columnar cells will be towards the surface. There are lots of little white spaces, the goblet cells, releasing mucus, and all this kind of light area out here, so that is a lining of mucus.
So where's the goblet again?
So this white space, it's kind of going in and out, but this white space is the mucus lining that's coming from the mucus glands, some of which are goblet cells.
Oh, but
And you kind of have to stroll around to see some.
the goblets?
Yeah. So like in this area, there's some goblet cells.
Is that the same as the gastric glands?
No. Okay, that's what I was just getting to. The little waves that you see actually are going deeper into the mucosa. Those are called gastric pits. Okay. Lining those gastric pits, there are mucus cells. Okay. More mucus cells. And glands releasing hormones too. So all of these, okay, see kind of the pink, the lighter pink, all of this, that's where some stomach glands are. Okay. We're going to talk about whether they release mucus in more detail. Gastric glands. Yep. Gastric just refers to the stomach.
And the pits are
The pits are actually the little spaces in between the simple columnar that reach deep down into the mucosa.
The white spaces?
Yep, the white spaces. Yep. So there are little cells, see these little simple cuboidal cells lining those gastric pits, those white spaces. So those cells are producing mucus, some other stuff that breaks down protein. We'll talk about pepsin later on. But those are the gastric glands. Okay. And you see them, they're reaching really far, right? All those simple cuboidal, the pink ones, really far. And this is all mucosa. Okay? So let's go further down. It's a little hard to see the transition there, but all of those, everything underneath that simple columnar layer, where all the gastric glands are, all the gastric glands are intermixed in the submucosa, right? That connective tissue. There are just so many gastric gland cells, it's hard to see the submucosa. Yeah, so all of this, here's the muscularis mucosae, some smooth muscle. Between that and the simple columnar, all of this is submucosa.
Lined with the gastric.
Oh, from where?
From the muscularis mucosae, that very thin layer of muscle, to the simple columnar cells up top, that's all the submucosa. Oh, I'm sorry. What's the? I'm sorry, not the submucosa.
Oh, no.
The lamina propria. I'm sorry. The other
Your
connective tissue.
videos.
Sorry, it's small. Restart your videos. The submucosa is down here underneath the muscularis mucosa. Okay, let's start again. Simple columnar cells line where the food is. They have some goblet cells stuck in between them, releasing mucus. That binds the food and also protects the stomach lining from acid. We'll talk more about that when we get to lecture next week. Where all of the little simple cuboidal cells are lining the gastric pits, right? Or little gastric glands. Okay. That's all lamina propria. So between the thin layer of muscle, the muscularis mucosae, and the simple columnar, all that is lamina propria.
Which includes the pits and the glands.
But yes, includes the pits. The pits are just the spaces that go deep down into that submucosa.
That's all part of the mucus layer though?
That's all part of the mucus. Yes, so you got the very thin, smooth muscle layer, muscularis mucosae, submucosa with all the gastric, right, pits and glands, and then you have the innermost layer that's lining the stomach where the food is. That's the simple columnar. No villi though, no big waves, right? Little finger-like projections. That's the small intestine. So if we start to scroll down here, you see more of an open space before we get to the muscle down there. This is all submucosa.
Submucosa.
This is an actual big blood vessel with blood cells in it. Oops. Another blood vessel here, blood vessel here. So all of that is in that submucosa. Just deep, just underneath the very thin muscle layer, right? That muscularis mucosae. Now after the submucosa, you can see large bands of muscle in here. You don't have to know all the bands, but there are 3 layers. All of this is smooth muscle. All of that is the muscularis externa. And then the outermost is serosa, which is basically visceral peritoneum, the serous membrane right attached to the stomach. So the big muscle layer, very similar to the esophagus, but it's thicker because the stomach churns the food more. Then you have the submucosa. Notice though, the submucosa of the esophagus had all of those esophageal glands that had
Yeah.
a distinct look to them. Here you have mostly blood vessels. Okay? The glands of the stomach are going to be in the lamina propria. All those simple cuboidal cells releasing secretions, lining those gastric pits, those little spaces that go deeper into that lamina propria. Here was our simple columnar cells, lining the innermost area. The white spaces are the glands, right? The pits.
Is
If
it
you
the
go
same as
deep-
cuboidal?
The pit in the gland, if you go deeper into the pit, then it becomes a gland. Okay, so we're going to talk about that in lecture. This pit is lined by simple cuboidal cells that release stomach enzymes and mucus.
Okay.
Deeper into that, there's
That's
going to
where
be
the
some
cuboidal
cells
is.
releasing hormones. That's where the gland, it switches in name. But that's not important for the lab. Okay, so it's just simple columnar, all the gastric glands in the lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosae, all that makes up the mucosa. Then you have the what?
Submucosa.
Submucosa, in this case, lots of blood vessels.
Muscularis
Then you have the
externa.
large muscularis externa,
Externa.
and then the
Serosa.
serosa, which is visceral peritoneum.
So on the exam, will you ask like the pointer?
I could ask for the layer. Okay, so make sure you know what the smooth muscle layer, right, the muscularis externa looks like. If it is just a few layers of cells, it has to be that muscularis mucosae, right? The smallest one.
Yeah.
If it's
Okay.
inappropriate, you ask for a gland, would it be gastric gland?
It would be gastric gland. Yep, you got it. If I ask for the layer that's in the lamina propria, gastric gland. If I put the pointer on the simple columnar cells, you can just identify it as simple
Columnar, but they
Yeah.
would.
If I ask what layer the simple columnar cells are in, that is the mucosa.
Mucosa.
Okay. So you're going to still see simple columnar in the small and large intestine, but it's going to have a little bit more waviness to the
More dips.
mucosa, the innermost mucosa layer, that simple columnar. So I'm going to put a small intestine slide up next. Okay.
You said gastric glands are in the lamina propria?
Lamina propria. So the stomach.
So
Yes.
it's going, the muscularis mucosa is going after in terms
Yes,
of
I just didn't have it in order there.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
put it in any particular order. So the mucosa includes the simple